I won multiple lawsuits against a corrupt businessman who tried to destroy me for breaking his monopoly. I'm 26 and opened a liquor store in my small hometown this year. The nearest liquor store was 30 minutes away in the city, charging $15 for a six-pack of local beer that cost them $3. Highway robbery, but they had a monopoly. My friend's mom was president of the local bank. With COVID, we're desperate to give out business loans. Great rates right now. I pitched my idea, undercut the city store's 80% markup with my 40% markup. Still profitable, but fair. Got the loan, bought the old bank building, hired my dad, general contractor, for renovations. Opened in May. First week, $4,000 profit. The location was perfect, near a national forest, tons of weekend tourists. My girlfriend and I worked 12-hour days, but it was worth it. 3 weeks after Memorial Day, an old guy walked in. Friendly at first, then offered to buy my store. The amount wouldn't even cover my loan principal. "You'll be sorry you rejected that offer," he said, leaving. A month later, I got sued for libel by someone I'd never heard of. Googled him. It was the old guy. Turns out he owned both liquor stores in the nearby city and sat on city council. Further digging revealed the city had an ordinance. Any business institution that does not fulfill the definition of a restaurant, tavern, or liquor dispensary will be excluded from obtaining a license for the sale of alcohol. Guess who headed the liquor license board? Same guy. Small-town corruption at its finest. My uncle's a lawyer in a neighboring state. I called for advice. "Hang on, I gotta make a call." He hung up. Hours later, "My partner and I will take your case pro bono." Turns out my uncle was licensed in 3 states. The libel suit claimed my newspaper ads damaged his reputation. 3 weeks later, case dismissed. My uncle warned, he'll try again. The next day, I got served again. Same lawsuit, but now I was the defendant personally, not my business. 4 weeks later, dismissed. Over 3 months, I was sued 5 times. Before the 5th hearing, we had a settlement meeting. Judge, both lawyers, the guy, and me. "Is there any way to stop this cycle of faulty litigation?" the judge asked. His lawyer handed over an offer. "You should be happy I'm offering anything instead of suing you into bankruptcy and buying that crap hole from the bank." The judge, bailiff, and his own lawyer stared at him in shock. He'd admitted the real reason for the lawsuits. My uncle smiled. "Actually, I've taken all my nephew's cases pro bono. He's only spent gas money, and your outburst just guaranteed a lawsuit." The case was dropped days later. We're now preparing to sue him. I want to go big, get press attention. My uncle says we need to be careful not to appear vindictive. Last week, things escalated. A health inspector showed up. Anonymous complaint about rats. No rats. But he found violations, a slightly crooked shelf, a light bulb that was too dim. $500 in fines. Next day, another inspector. Fire safety, more mysterious violations. Another $500. Then the police. Reports of underage sales. I card everyone, even obvious seniors. They watched for 3 hours, found nothing. This continued daily. Building inspector, OSHA, even someone claiming to check our signage permits. My girlfriend quit. I can't handle this stress. My dad called. "Son, maybe you should just sell." But I'm stubborn. Then came the letter from my bank. They were calling in my loan early. Unusual account activity and multiple city violations make you high risk. My friend's mom called me personally. "I'm so sorry." The board overruled me. Richard Brennan sits on our board too. Richard Brennan, the corrupt businessman. He was on my bank's board. I had 30 days to pay the full loan or lose everything. My uncle filed an emergency injunction, but the judge assigned to our case played golf with Brennan every Sunday. Motion denied. I was finished. No loan, no business, probably bankruptcy. Then yesterday, a woman walked into my store. Professional, 50s, serious expression. "Mr. Davidson, I'm Agent Sarah Huffman, FBI. We need to talk about Richard Brennan." "FBI? We've been investigating him for 2 years. Racketeering, bribery, tax evasion. Your case gave us the final pieces." "I don't understand." "We need your cooperation. Wear a wire." He'd never talk to me. "He will if you agree to sell. Your store's success is tanking his profits. 3 of his managers quit to apply here." "And if I help?" "We arrest him, you get your business back, plus whistleblower reward, 7 figures. She slid me a document. Brennan wasn't just corrupt. He ran interstate smuggling through his liquor network. There's one more thing. Your uncle's former DOJ. He called us day one. What? My phone rang. Uncle Jim. Hey, kiddo. Agent Huffman there? Uncle, what the hell? I've been hunting Brennan for 15 years. Ever since he got my partner disbarred. Your partner? Your Aunt Linda? She was a judge. Refused to rule in his favor. He destroyed her career. She killed herself 3 years later. I never knew Aunt Linda was a judge. This was all a setup? No. Your business is real. But when Brennan showed up, I knew we had our chance. Agent Huffman stood. The wire. Tomorrow? I looked at the FBI document. At the bottom, highlighted, Richard Brennan, connected to disappearance of Judge Linda Marius. My aunt didn't kill herself. I stare at the FBI document, my hands shaking as I read the highlighted section again. Richard Brennan, connected to disappearance of Judge Linda Marius. The words blur together. My aunt didn't kill herself. Uncle Jim's voice comes through the phone speaker, calm and measured, like he's been waiting 15 years for this exact moment. Agent Huffman stands across from me, watching my face, probably reading every emotion I'm trying to hide. The document lists dates, locations, witness statements. There's a photo of Aunt Linda clipped to the corner. She's smiling in her judge's robes, confident, alive. I never knew her. She was just a name at family gatherings, a tragedy nobody talked about. Uncle Jim keeps speaking, explaining something about evidence and investigation, but I'm stuck on that photo. She looks like my mom. Same eyes, same smile. Brennan destroyed her because she wouldn't do what he wanted. Then he killed her and made it look like suicide. And Uncle Jim has been hunting him ever since, waiting for the right moment, the right case. My case. Agent Huffman pulls out more paperwork, spreading it across my counter. This is what wearing a wire means, she says. I need to act desperate enough to sell, which shouldn't be hard since I actually am desperate. The bank called in my loan. I have 30 days. I'm going to lose everything anyway. She shows me a list of things they need Brennan to admit on tape. It's longer than I expected. Specific phrases about the lawsuits, the inspections, the bank board interference. She needs him to connect the dots himself, to explain how he used his government positions to run his smuggling operation. The list has checkboxes next to each item like a grocery list. Get Brennan to admit he filed false lawsuits. Get him to discuss bribing inspectors. Get him to explain his interstate network. Each checkbox represents years in federal prison if we can make this work. I hang up with Uncle Jim without saying goodbye. Agent Huffman looks at me, waiting. I need time to think about this, I tell her. She shakes her head. Brennan might disappear if he suspects federal investigation. We've been watching him for 2 years. He's careful. One wrong move and he'll destroy evidence and run. She gives me until tomorrow morning to decide whether I'm willing to help. Then she pulls a business card from her pocket and leaves it on my counter next to the documents. The card is plain, just her name and a phone number. No FBI logo, no official markings. She walks to the door, pauses, looks back at me. Tomorrow morning, she says. After that, we move without you, and you lose your business anyway. The door closes behind her. I stand alone in my store surrounded by shelves of liquor bottles that might not be mine much longer. The card sits on the counter. The photo of Aunt Linda stares up at me from the document. I pick up my phone to call someone, anyone, but I don't know who to call. My girlfriend left. My dad told me to give up. My uncle has been using me for revenge. I'm completely alone in this. That night I can't sleep in the apartment I'm renting since losing my house felt inevitable. The place is small, furnished, temporary. I never unpacked the boxes in the corner because I knew I wouldn't be here long. I keep thinking about Aunt Linda, trying to remember her from childhood. There's a vague memory of a woman at Thanksgiving, laughing at something my dad said. Was that her? Or am I making it up because I want to remember? I wonder if Uncle Jim ever actually cared about my business or just saw an opportunity when Brennan showed up. Maybe both. Maybe he cared and saw opportunity and didn't see a difference. I stare at the ceiling. The apartment above me has someone walking around, footsteps crossing back and forth. It's past midnight. I check my phone. No messages. I pull up old family photos on social media, scrolling through my mom's albums. There she is, Aunt Linda at a family reunion. Nobody should have to deal with what Brennan put us through. She asks what I'm going to do. I don't know, I say. She tells me she knows I'll make the right choice, whatever that is. We hang up. I still can't sleep. In the morning, I call Agent Huffman and agree to wear the wire. Partly because I want to know the truth about Aunt Linda. Partly because I'm tired of Brennan winning. She answers on the first ring like she's been waiting by the phone. Good, she says. Come to the Riverside Inn outside town. Room 247. We have everything set up. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I drive out there, watching my mirrors for anyone following. The hotel is old, cheap, the kind of place where nobody asks questions. I park in back and take the stairs to the second floor. Agent Huffman opens the door before I can knock. At the hotel, Agent Huffman introduces me to two other FBI agents who will be monitoring the wire and providing backup. One is tall, 30s, introduces himself as Davis. The other is older, gray hair, says his name is Nixon. They show me the recording equipment, which is smaller than I expected. It looks like a thick bandage, flat against my skin. Nixon explains that I'll wear it under my shirt during the meeting with Brennan. The microphone is tiny, barely visible. Davis pulls out a laptop and shows me the audio quality. They can hear everything. Huffman hands me a small device that looks like a car key fob. Panic button, she says. Press it if things go wrong and we're coming in. I put it in my pocket. Nixon starts taping the wire to my chest, positioning it carefully. He tells me not to touch it, not to adjust my shirt, to act completely natural. The tape pulls at my skin. I can feel the weight of it, strange and foreign. The agents spend 3 hours coaching me on what to say and how to guide the conversation without being obvious. Huffman plays Brennan, sitting across from me at the hotel room table. She mimics his voice, his mannerisms, his way of leaning back when he's confident. Ask about the lawsuits, she says. Get him talking about why he filed them. Lead him to explain his strategy. We practice over and over. Davis critiques my performance, tells me I'm being too aggressive, too obvious. Brennan is smart and will be suspicious, he says. I need to seem genuinely defeated and desperate to sell. Nixon coaches me on body language. Don't lean forward, don't make too much eye contact, keep my shoulders down. Look beaten, look like I've given up. It's not hard to tap into that feeling because part of me has given up. Agent Huffman explains that they already have evidence of Brennan's interstate smuggling operation, but need him to admit to the local corruption and intimidation tactics. The smuggling charges alone won't stick without proving he used his government positions to make the operation work. They need him to connect the dots. They need him to explain how being on city council, on the liquor license board, on the bank board, all served his criminal enterprise. She shows me more documents, more evidence they've collected. Financial records showing money moving between his stores and shell companies. Shipping manifests that don't match inventory. Testimony from his former employees about illegal products moving across state lines. It's all there. But without the local corruption piece, a good lawyer could argue he's just a businessman who made some mistakes. They need the whole picture. They need him to admit he used government power for criminal purposes. I practice the conversation over and over with Davis playing Brennan while Huffman and Nixon critique my performance. They keep telling me to seem more broken, more willing to accept whatever he offers. Davis is good at playing Brennan. Too good. He leans back in his chair, smirks, makes lowball offers. He insults my business, my decisions, my future. Each practice run feels real. Each time I have to swallow my anger and play defeated. By the third hour, I'm exhausted. My shirt is damp with sweat from the wire taped to my chest. Huffman finally nods. You're ready, she says. We set up the meeting for tomorrow afternoon at your store, 3 p.m. Don't be late, don't tell anyone. And remember, we'll be listening to everything. My phone buzzes against the hotel desk. Uncle Jim's name lights up the screen. I stare at it until the call goes to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it buzzes again. Same name. I reach to decline, but Agent Huffman touches my arm. She tells me he might have information that could help tomorrow. She says former DOJ agents know how these operations work. I pick up on the third ring. Uncle Jim asks if I agreed to wear the wire. His voice sounds different from usual, tighter somehow. I tell him yes, I'm helping the FBI. Then I add that we need to talk about Aunt Linda when this is over. The silence stretches long enough that I check if the call dropped. He finally says he understands I'm angry. He insists everything he did was to protect me, while also getting justice for Linda. The words come out rehearsed, like he's been preparing this speech for years. I tell him that using family for revenge isn't protection. My voice comes out harder than I intended. He goes quiet again before saying we'll talk after Richard is arrested. The line goes dead. Agent Huffman pulls out a burner phone from her. The other agents start packing up their equipment for the night. One of them tells me I should stay at the hotel because they want me nearby for final prep work. He says it's easier than driving back and forth. Huffman walks me to a room 2 doors down from their command center. The room smells like cleaning products and has generic landscape paintings on the walls. She tells me to try to get some sleep. I lie on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling tiles. My brain won't shut off. I run through conversation scenarios, imagining different ways Richard might respond. I picture him figuring out I'm wearing a wire and what happens next. The scenarios get worse as the night goes on. Around 4 a.m., I finally drift off, but I wake up an hour later from a dream where Richard is ripping the wire off my chest. Morning comes too fast. One of the agents knocks at 7 a.m. with coffee and a bagel I can't eat. At 8 a.m., they bring me back to the command center. The senior agent, whose name I still don't know, tells me to take off my shirt. He pulls out the recording device, which is smaller than I expected, maybe the size of 2 stacked quarters. He tapes it carefully to my chest, pressing the edges down to make sure it stays. The wire runs along my side and connects to a small transmitter that clips to my belt. He makes me walk around the room, sit down, stand up, reach for things on high shelves. He watches how I move and adjusts the wire twice. He tells me not to unconsciously touch or adjust it during the meeting. He says people tend to fidget when they're nervous, and that's how they get caught. Agent Huffman pulls up a chair across from me. She reviews the key points one more time. She needs Richard to admit he filed false lawsuits against me. She needs him to explain how he used his government positions to harass me. She needs him to confirm he influenced the bank through his board position. She emphasizes that I need him to explicitly connect these actions to forcing me to sell. She says the connection is what makes it racketeering instead of just corruption. The other agents drill me on specific phrases that might get Richard talking. They tell me to act defeated but not suspicious. They say I should seem grateful he's still offering anything at all. We practice until my responses sound natural. At 2 p.m., I get in my car. 2 FBI vehicles follow at a distance, far enough back that they won't be obvious. Agent Huffman, she tells me to breathe normally and trust the equipment. I pull into the parking lot behind my store. The building looks different somehow, smaller maybe. My hands shake as I unlock the back door. Inside, everything is exactly how I left it yesterday. I start straightening shelves even though there are no customers and the shelves don't need straightening. My hands won't stop shaking. I keep reminding myself to breathe normally. I catch myself reaching for the wire under my shirt and force my hand back down. The clock on the wall ticks toward 3 p.m. Each minute feels like it takes an hour. At exactly 3 p.m., Richard's Mercedes pulls into the parking lot. I watch through the window as he gets out, adjusting his jacket. He walks in with the same confident smile he had during our first meeting months ago. He looks around the store slowly, taking in the shelves and the layout. He comments that it's a shame I couldn't make it work. His voice has that fake sympathy that makes my skin crawl. I force myself to nod in agreement. I tell him the bank called in my loan and I'm out of options. The words taste bitter, but I keep my voice flat and defeated. He sits down at the small table I use for paperwork, the chair creaking under his weight. He asks what I'm willing to accept. He pulls a folder from his briefcase, the papers already prepared. The offer is sitting right there, typed up and ready for my signature. I look at the number on the paper. That won't even cover half of what the bank is calling in, let alone give me anything to start over with. I tell him that's not enough to cover my debts, and he shrugs like he's talking about the weather. He says that's what happens when you refuse reasonable offers and force people to take drastic measures. The way he says it makes my stomach turn. I ask him what he means by drastic measures, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands are shaking under the table. He leans back in his chair, and this satisfied smile spreads across his face like he's been waiting for me to ask. He starts listing everything he did, the lawsuits, the inspections, talking to the bank board, and he's not even trying to hide it. He sounds proud, like he's explaining a clever business strategy instead of admitting to destroying someone's life. He talks about each lawsuit like it was a chess move, describing how he filed the first one knowing it would get dismissed, but also knowing it would cost me time and stress. He admits that filing multiple lawsuits was designed to drain my resources and make me desperate and that he never expected to win any of them. The goal was always to force me into this exact situation where I'd have to sell for whatever he offered. I can feel the wire taped to my chest, and I'm terrified he'll somehow notice it, but he just keeps talking. I ask about the daily inspections, and he actually laughs. He says he has friends in every department who owe him favors, people he's helped out over the years, or given campaign money to, or just done business with long enough that they'll do what he asks. He describes calling in those favors to make my life miserable, sending inspectors to find violations that didn't matter, writing up citations for shelves being slightly crooked or light bulbs being dim. Agent Huffman's voice comes through my earpiece so quietly, I almost miss it, telling me they're getting everything on tape and I'm doing great. Richard keeps going, explaining that he's been running liquor distribution in this region for 20 years, and he's not about to let some kid with a business loan mess up his operation. He talks about his network like it's completely normal, mentioning how he moves product across state lines and has connections in 3 states that help him avoid taxes and regulations. I push him on the bank loan being called in early, acting like I'm just trying to understand how everything fell apart so fast. He confirms that he used his position on the bank board to pressure them into declaring me high risk. He says it was easy once he showed them all the inspection violations, even though he's the one who arranged those violations in the first place. He leans forward now, his elbows on the table, and tells me I should have taken his first offer because now I'm losing everything anyway. The only reason he's offering anything at all, he says, is because buying the building from the bank would take a few extra weeks, and he wants to reopen under his own name right away. He's already got plans for the space, already hired managers, already printed new signs. I force myself to ask if he did the same thing to other people who tried to compete with him, and his expression changes. It gets darker, harder, and for the first time I see something mean in his eyes. He mentions 2 other businesses that tried to open in the area over the years, both of which closed after having similar problems with inspections and licensing and mysterious financial troubles. He makes it clear he has no regrets about any of it, that this is just how business works when you're protecting your territory. Agent Huffman's voice comes through again, telling me I have enough and I should wrap it up safely. I tell Richard I need a day to think about his offer, that it's a big decision, and I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. He stands up, straightening his jacket, and says, "I have until tomorrow morning." After that, the offer disappears completely, and he'll just wait for the bank to foreclose. As he walks toward the door, he turns back like he just remembered something. He mentions that he heard I have a lawyer helping me, some family member who thinks he can fight this. Richard says it doesn't matter because judges in this county know who really runs things, and he's made sure my emergency injunction was denied. He's still smiling when he walks out the door. I watch him stand there, straightening his jacket like he just closed a normal business deal, and something in his face shifts. He gets this look, almost proud, like he wants me to understand how clever he's been. He mentions Judge Guthrie by name, saying they go way back, that they're close friends who help each other out. He talks about doing favors for the judge over the years, making problems disappear when needed, smoothing things over with people who might cause trouble. My hands grip the edge of the table because I know this is it. This is exactly what Agent Huffman needed on tape, proof that he's been corrupting judges and not just harassing me. He keeps talking, explaining how judges in this county understand how things work, how they know who really runs the show around here. I force my face to stay neutral, even though my pulse is hammering in my ears. He finally stops talking and heads for the door, turning back one more time to remind me I have until tomorrow morning. The second he walks out, I hear car doors opening outside. Agent Huffman comes through the door with 4 other agents behind her, all of them moving fast and professional. She walks straight to me and says, I did perfect, that they got everything they needed on tape. One of the agents is already on his phone, talking fast to someone about arrest warrants and evidence. Another agent is setting up a laptop on my counter, pulling up files and recordings. Agent Huffman explains they're coordinating with federal prosecutors and local police right now, that they'll arrest Richard at his home tonight before he has time to destroy evidence or run. She's talking quickly, giving orders to the other agents, making calls, and I just stand there feeling like I'm watching. She says that should be enough to get the bank to back off while the investigation continues. My phone rings, and I see Uncle Jim's name on the screen. Agent Huffman nods and tells me to answer. Then she taps something on her phone, and suddenly Uncle Jim's voice is coming through her speaker too. He sounds excited, almost breathless, telling me I did great out there. He says Linda would be proud of me, that I got Richard to admit things they've been trying to prove for 15 years. I don't say anything back to that. I'm still angry that he used me, that he never told me the truth about any of this. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. Agent Huffman is watching my face, and she must see something there because she takes the phone and starts talking to Uncle Jim about next steps and legal procedures. The other agents are packing up equipment and making more calls. One of them is talking about getting a judge to sign off on the arrest warrants within the next hour. Agent Huffman hands my phone back and tells me I need to go to the hotel where they had me staying before. She says I can't be here when they arrest Richard, that I need to be somewhere safe in case he has people watching the store. I lock up and follow one of the agents to an unmarked car. We drive to the hotel in silence, and he walks me up to the room, checking inside before leaving me alone. I sit on the bed and finally pull the wire off my chest, the tape ripping at my skin. My hands are shaking now that it's over. I turn on the TV but can't focus on anything. Agent Huffman texts me updates every 30 minutes. The first one says they're moving into position. The second says the warrants are signed. The third says they're at Richard's house. At 8 o'clock, my phone buzzes again, and this time the message says both Richard and Judge Guthrie are in federal custody. I read it 3 times before it feels real. I think about calling my dad, but I don't know what to say yet. I order food, but barely eat it. I keep checking my phone even though Agent Huffman said she'd contact me in the morning. I finally fall asleep around midnight with the TV still on. The next morning, Agent Huffman shows up at 7 with coffee and a folder full of papers. She sits across from me at the small hotel table and starts going through what they found when they searched Richard's properties. She says they discovered financial records going back decades, proof of bribery and tax evasion, and smuggling operations worth millions of dollars. She shows me spreadsheets with numbers that don't make sense to me, names of people and businesses, dates of transactions. She explains that Richard wasn't just running liquor stores, he was moving illegal products across state lines and using his government positions to protect the operation. She flips to another section of the folder, and I see Aunt Linda's name on top of a page. Agent Huffman's voice gets quieter as she explains what happened to Linda. She says Richard had Linda disbarred through false ethics complaints after Linda ruled against him in a major case years ago. The FBI has been investigating Linda's car accident, and they believe Richard arranged it, though they can't prove murder without more evidence. She shows me the ethics complaints, all of them fake, all of them designed to destroy Linda's career. She shows me reports about the accident, about the investigation that ruled it a suicide, about the inconsistencies that made the FBI suspicious. I stare at Linda's photo in the file, a professional headshot from when she was still a judge. She looks confident and serious, and nothing like the broken person Uncle Jim described. Agent Huffman closes the folder and tells me the case against Richard is solid now because of what I got on tape. She says he'll probably take a plea deal to avoid trial, but either way, he's going to prison for a long time. I thank her, and she leaves, saying she'll be in touch about next steps and about the whistleblower reward. I sit alone in the hotel room for another hour before I text Uncle Jim asking him to meet me at a coffee shop outside town. He responds immediately saying he'll be there in 2 hours. I get to the coffee shop early and sit in a booth in the back corner. When Uncle Jim walks in, he looks different from I remember from just a few days ago. He looks older, more tired, like carrying all this weight for 15 years has finally caught up with him. He sits down across from me and orders coffee but doesn't drink it. I ask him why he never told me the truth about any of this. He takes a long breath and starts explaining that when I called him about Richard's first lawsuit, he recognized the tactics immediately. He knew it was Richard, knew this was his chance to finally get evidence that would stick. He says he should have told me what was really happening, but he was afraid I'd refuse to help if I knew I was used for his revenge against the man who destroyed Linda. He admits that everything he did was about Linda, about getting justice for her, about making Richard pay for what he did. I tell him I understand wanting justice, but using family to get revenge is wrong. He nods slowly and says he knows, says he's thought about it every day since I called, says he almost told me the truth a dozen times, but couldn't risk losing the opportunity. He tells me about Linda, about who she really was before Richard targeted her. He describes a judge who wouldn't compromise, who stood up to corruption even when it cost her everything. He talks about finding her after the accident, about knowing in his gut that Richard had killed her, but having no way to prove it. His voice cracks when he describes the 15 years of watching Richard continue his corruption while being powerless to stop him. I realize Uncle Jim has been living with this anger and grief for longer than I've been an adult. I'm still mad at him for using me, but I understand why he did it, and that understanding sits heavy in my chest. I tell him he's right. I would have refused if I'd known the truth from the start. Using family members for personal revenge is exactly the kind of corruption we're supposed to be fighting against. He doesn't argue back or try to defend himself, just sits there nodding slowly like he expected this reaction all along. He says he's sorry for not being honest with me, but then he looks me straight in the eye and says he'd do it all again because Richard destroyed Linda and deserves to pay for what he did. The honesty of that statement hits harder than any excuse would have. We sit in silence for a while, both staring at our coffee cups that neither of us has touched. The quiet feels heavy, like there's 15 years of grief and anger filling the space between us. Finally, I break the silence and ask him to tell me about Aunt Linda, the real story, and not the cleaned-up version I heard as a kid. He takes a deep breath and starts talking, describing a brilliant judge who stood up to corruption in ways that cost her everything. He tells me about cases where she ruled against powerful people, how she refused to compromise her principles even when it would have been easier and safer to look the other way. She paid for her integrity with her career first, then eventually with her life. Uncle Jim pulls out his phone and shows me photos of Linda from before Richard targeted her. She's smiling in the pictures, confident and strong, exactly the kind of person who would refuse to bend the rules for anyone's convenience. He tears up while talking about finding her after the car accident, his voice breaking as he describes knowing deep in his gut that it wasn't really an accident, but being completely powerless to prove anything. The police ruled it accidental, case closed, and Richard walked away clean, while Uncle Jim carried the weight of knowing the truth. I realize sitting there that Uncle Jim has been carrying this burden for 15 years, watching Richard continue his corruption and expand his power while being unable to stop him. I'm still angry about being used as a tool for his revenge, but I understand why he did it now, and somehow that understanding doesn't make me feel any better about the situation. My phone rings, and Agent Huffman's name appears on the screen. I answer, and she tells me that Richard's lawyer contacted federal prosecutors this morning about a possible plea deal. Richard is willing to provide detailed information about other corrupt officials in the area in exchange for reduced sentencing. She explains that his cooperation could expose an entire network of local corruption involving people we haven't even identified yet. The investigation might expand to include city council members, county officials, and business owners across 3 states. I thank her for the update, and she says she'll keep me informed as things develop. An hour later, my friend's mom calls. Her voice sounds shaky and upset as she apologizes for what happened with the loan. She explains that the bank board held an emergency meeting yesterday and voted to reverse the early loan call based on FBI evidence of illegal interference. The board members who voted with Richard are being investigated now, and she says the whole situation makes her sick because she trusted people who turned out to be corrupt. She offers to extend my loan terms to help me recover from the business losses, adding extra time and reducing my monthly payments. I tell her I appreciate it, and that I never blamed her personally for what happened. She sounds relieved and says she's proud of me for not giving up when things got bad. The next morning, I wake up to missed calls and text messages. Local news outlets picked up the story of Richard's arrest overnight, and apparently it's getting significant coverage. I drive to my store expecting a normal, quiet Tuesday, but when I pull into the parking lot, there are cars everywhere. Inside, customers fill every aisle, picking up bottles and asking questions about what happened. A woman tells me she drove 40 minutes from the next county because she wanted to support a local business that stood up to corruption. Sales triple that day, compared to my best previous day, and people keep coming in throughout the week. Tourists stopping by on their way to the National Forest make a point of shopping at my store instead of Richard's locations in the city. My phone buzzes with a text from my ex-girlfriend saying she saw the news coverage and asking if I'm okay. I text back that I'm surviving and thank her for listening that night when I called her scared and stressed. She responds saying she's proud of me for not giving up when everyone told me to quit, and we leave the conversation at that. It feels like closure without needing to say more. Over the next week, Agent Huffman keeps me updated on how the investigation is expanding. Richard's plea deal is revealing corruption that goes deeper than anyone expected, involving city council members who took bribes, county officials who ignored violations for money, and business owners across 3 states who participated in the smuggling operation. Each update brings news of another arrest or resignation. Judge Guthrie resigns from the bench on Thursday and accepts his own plea deal that includes disbarment and prison time. 2 city council members get arrested on Friday morning. By the following Monday, the entire liquor license board is dissolved, pending a full investigation of its practices and the people Richard placed on it. The local newspaper runs daily stories about the corruption network being dismantled, and my store gets mentioned in most of them as the business that helped expose everything. More customers keep showing up, telling me they respect what I did and want to support someone who fought back instead of giving in. Uncle Jim and Corey file the civil lawsuit 3 days after Richard's arrest. The paperwork arrives at my store by courier, and I flip through pages of legal language that basically says Richard owes me for everything he put me through. Agent Huffman stops by that afternoon and tells me the criminal evidence makes this straightforward, that Richard's lawyers will probably push for settlement instead of letting this go to trial. She says the wire recording alone proves harassment and abuse of power, and his own admission about the lawsuit seals it. I ask how long it takes, and she shrugs, says maybe 2 months if his lawyers are smart, longer if they want to fight. I sign the papers Uncle Jim needs and send them back, then go back to restocking shelves because the store still needs to run even while everything else is happening. My dad shows up the next morning without calling first. He walks in looking tired and older than I remember, and he stands by the counter for a minute before saying anything. He tells me he's sorry for advising me to sell, that he was scared Richard would hurt me or burn the building down or something worse. I tell him it's okay, but he shakes his head and says it's not, that he should have trusted me to handle it. He asks if there's anything that needs fixing, and I show him the crooked shelf that health inspector cited, the dim light fixture, the fire extinguisher mount that's supposedly wrong. We spend the afternoon fixing everything properly, replacing the shelf bracket and installing a brighter bulb and remounting the extinguisher according to actual code instead of whatever made-up standard those corrupt inspectors used. He doesn't talk much while we work, but it feels good to have him there, like we're building something together again, instead of him telling me to give up. When we finish, he tells me he's proud of me for not quitting, and I believe him this time. The newspaper reporter calls 2 days later asking for an interview. She's from the local weekly paper that covers town council meetings and high school sports, and suddenly she's got the biggest story in years. We meet at the store after closing, and she sets up a recorder on the counter, asks me to start from the beginning. I tell her about opening the business and Richard's first visit, about the lawsuits and the inspections and the bank calling in my loan. I'm careful to mention Uncle Jim and the FBI multiple times, making sure people understand I didn't do this alone. She asks if I ever considered selling and walking away, and I admit I came very close, that there were nights I was ready to give up. She writes everything down and takes photos of the store, says the story will run next week. I ask her not to make me sound like some hero because I'm not. I just got lucky that Uncle Jim had history with Richard and the FB. I was already investigating. She promises to keep it balanced, but I can tell she's excited about the story, about having something bigger than school board drama to cover. Agent Huffman emails me the following Monday with news about the whistleblower reward. She says my cooperation was essential to proving the racketeering charges, that wearing the wire and getting Richard to admit everything on tape closed gaps in their case. The reward amount depends on what assets they recover from Richard's operation, but she estimates several $100,000, maybe more. It takes months to process through federal bureaucracy, but the money is real and it's coming. I read the email 3 times to make sure I understand it correctly, then sit in my empty store trying to process that this nightmare might actually end with me ahead instead of bankrupt. The money would cover my loan completely with enough left over to expand the business, maybe even buy a house instead of renting. I forward the email to Uncle Jim, and he calls within minutes, tells me this is what happens when people fight back instead of accepting corruption. I want to feel good about it, but mostly I'm just tired. The prosecutor contacts me 2 weeks later about Richard's sentencing hearing. She says it's scheduled for 3 months out and asks if I want to give a victim impact statement, where I tell the judge how Richard's crimes affected me. I agree immediately because I need to say something about what this cost me, about the stress and the fear and almost losing everything. She sends me guidelines about what to include and what to avoid, tells me to focus on personal impact rather than requesting specific punishment. I start writing notes about sleepless nights and my girlfriend leaving and my dad telling me to give up, about feeling like the system was rigged against me until the FBI showed up. The statement grows longer each time I work on it, and I keep having to cut parts that sound too angry or vindictive. The prosecutor reviews my draft and says it's good, but needs to be shorter, more focused on specific harm rather than general frustration. I revise it 3 more times before she approves the final version. Uncle Jim and I start meeting for coffee every Thursday morning. At first, we don't talk about Richard or Aunt Linda, just normal stuff about the store and his other cases. But gradually, he starts sharing stories about Linda, about what she was like before Richard destroyed her career. He tells me she was funny and stubborn and believed the legal system could actually deliver justice if people were brave enough to stand up. She ruled against Richard in a case involving his liquor license board, found that he'd been taking bribes to approve competitors' applications, then using city ordinances to shut them down later. Richard filed ethics complaints claiming she was biased, manufactured evidence of improper conduct, got her disbarred within a year. Uncle Jim's voice breaks when he talks about finding her after the car accident, about knowing it wasn't really an accident, but having no way to prove Richard was involved. I listen and realize my uncle has been carrying this weight for 15 years, watching Richard continue his corruption while being unable to stop him. Our relationship will never be the same because I know he used me, but I understand why he did it, and that makes it harder to stay angry. We're finding something new between us, not quite trust, but maybe respect for what we both survived. The civil lawsuit settles 6 weeks after filing. Richard's lawyers contact Uncle Jim with an offer that covers my remaining loan balance, all legal fees, and $200,000 in damages for business losses and emotional distress. Uncle Jim says we could fight for more, but it would take months, and Richard might hide assets while we wait. I tell him to take the settlement because I want this finished, want Richard's money out of my life so I can move forward. The paperwork takes another week to finalize, and then the money hits my bank account in one massive transfer. I pay off the business loan the same day and watch my debt disappear from the bank's website. My friend's mom calls to congratulate me and apologize again for the board's actions, says the bank has completely restructured how they handle board member conflicts. I thank her and tell her the loan actually worked out despite everything, that her initial faith in my business idea was what started all of this. The remaining settlement money sits in my account like a promise that I can actually build something here. I use $70,000 from the settlement to renovate and expand the store. Contractors knock out a wall to add more floor space, and I install new shelving for craft beer selection that tourists love. The local brewery in the next county agrees to stock their seasonal releases exclusively at my store, and I add a wine section featuring regional wineries that Richard never bothered carrying. The work takes 3 weeks, and I stay open during construction, which is chaos, but customers seem to enjoy watching the progress. I hire 3 employees to help manage the increased traffic, 2 college students who work evenings and weekends, plus a retired guy who wanted part-time work. Training them takes longer than I expected because I've been doing everything myself for so long, but it feels good to delegate and focus on bigger picture stuff like inventory and marketing. Sales increase 40% within the first month after renovation, and suddenly the business is profitable beyond anything I projected in my original loan application. The store becomes what I imagined when I first pitched the idea to the bank, a real community business instead of just me grinding through 12-hour days. Richard's sentencing hearing happens on a cold Thursday morning in November. The federal courthouse is 2 hours away, and Uncle Jim drives us there together, neither of us talking much during the trip. The courtroom fills with people I don't recognize, probably other victims of Richard's schemes or FBI agents who worked the case. Agent Huffman sits in the front row and nods when I walk in. The judge enters and everyone stands. Then Richard is brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his usual expensive suit. He looks smaller somehow, less threatening than the man who walked into my store and tried to destroy everything. The prosecutor presents evidence and witness statements, and then it's my turn to read my victim impact statement. I walk to the podium with my printed pages, and my hands shake as I start reading. I describe opening my business with hope and excitement, then watching Richard systematically try to crush it through corruption and abuse of power. I talk about my girlfriend leaving and my dad telling me to give up, about lying awake at night wondering if I should just sell and walk away. I explain how his actions nearly destroyed my faith in the justice system, made me believe that corrupt people always win if they have enough power. My voice cracks when I mention almost losing everything, and I have to pause before finishing. The judge listens without expression and thanks me when I'm done. She sentences Richard to 12 years in federal prison, plus restitution to his victims, and I feel relief mixed with exhaustion wash over me. 12 years won't undo what he did to Aunt Linda or the other people he hurt, but it's something real, and it means he can't hurt anyone else for a long time. Agent Huffman catches me outside the courthouse after the hearing ends. She tells me the case is officially closed, that my cooperation helped dismantle a corruption network that operated for 2 decades. 15 people have been charged so far, including city council members and county officials, with more investigations ongoing. She says my willingness to wear that wire made it all possible, that without Richard admitting everything on tape, they couldn't have connected the local corruption to his interstate smuggling operation. I thank her for giving me the chance to fight back instead of just accepting defeat, and she smiles and says, "I did the hard part by not giving up when everyone told me to quit." She hands me her card and tells me to call if I ever need anything, then walks back into the courthouse. Uncle Jim and I drive home in silence, both of us processing what just happened. Richard is going to prison, and I still have my business, and Aunt Linda finally got some measure of justice, but none of it feels as satisfying as I expected. Mostly I just feel tired and ready to move forward with my life, to run my store and stop thinking about corruption and federal investigations. The victory is real, but it cost me things I can't get back, and that's something I'll have to live with even as everything else gets better. 4 months after Richard's arrest, the whistleblower reward finally came through. $340,000 deposited into my account on a Tuesday morning, and I stared at the bank app on my phone for 10 minutes, making sure it was real. I paid off the business loan that same day, walked into the bank, and handed them a cashier's check for the full remaining balance. My friend's mom shook my hand and congratulated me, and I felt lighter walking out than I had in months. I used $50,000 for store improvements, new shelving and better lighting, and a proper point-of-sale system that didn't crash every third transaction. Another $100,000 went into a high-yield savings account earmarked for college funds, even though I didn't have kids yet and wasn't even dating anyone. The rest I kept for operating capital and emergencies because I'd learned the hard way that you never know when someone powerful might decide to destroy you. My friend's mom called me into her office 2 weeks later to talk about the bank's restructuring. The board had been completely overhauled after federal investigators found evidence of Richard's interference in loan decisions. 3 board members resigned, 2 were forced out, and new oversight policies were implemented to prevent anyone from using their position to target specific businesses. She told me my case changed how local banks operate, that they now have mandatory reporting requirements for any board member who tries to influence lending decisions for personal reasons. I thanked her for the original loan and for fighting the board when they tried to call it in early. She said she wished she'd fought harder, but I told her she did what she could against someone like Richard. 6 months after the arrest, Uncle Jim organized a memorial service for Aunt Linda at the church where she used to volunteer. I drove 3 hours to attend, arriving early to help set up chairs and arrange photos on a table near the altar. Family members I hadn't seen in years showed up, cousins and aunts and uncles who remembered Linda as the brilliant young judge she'd been before Richard destroyed her. Uncle Jim gave a speech about justice delayed but finally delivered, about how Linda would have been proud that her case helped bring down someone who'd corrupted the system for decades. He cried during the speech, and I'd never seen him cry before. Afterwards, people shared stories about Linda that I'd never heard, about her sharp sense of humor and her refusal to compromise her principles, even when it cost her everything. I realized I'd spent my whole adult life not knowing this woman who'd shaped Uncle Jim's entire mission, and that felt like another loss on top of the original one. I met my ex-girlfriend for coffee 3 weeks later at a place halfway between our towns. She looked good, healthier than when we'd been together during the worst of the harassment campaign. We talked about everything that happened, about Richard's arrest and the trial and the whistleblower reward. She told me she was dating someone new, a teacher she met through mutual friends, and that he was kind and stable and didn't bring federal investigations into their relationship. I was genuinely glad she got out before things got worse, before the wire and the arrest and all the complications that followed. We agreed to stay friends and exchange numbers, and when we hugged goodbye in the parking lot, it felt like real closure instead of the messy ending we'd had before. The store's first anniversary approached in early May, and despite everything, I'd turned a profit that exceeded my original projections by 40%. The tourist season had been strong, and local support after Richard's arrest brought in customers who'd never shopped at my store before. I planned a celebration event with local vendors setting up booths in the parking lot, craft beer tastings inside, and a band playing covers on a small stage. I spent 2 weeks coordinating with vendors and getting permits and arranging for extra parking in the vacant lot next door. The event felt important, not just as a business milestone, but as a way to thank the community for supporting me when I could have lost everything. Uncle Jim helped me establish a small legal fund for other small business owners facing harassment or corruption, using $75,000 from my whistleblower reward. We named it the Linda Marius Justice Fund and set up a nonprofit structure with Uncle Jim and 2 other lawyers on the board. The fund would provide free legal consultation and, in some cases, pro bono representation for business owners targeted by powerful interests. Uncle Jim handled all the paperwork and legal setup, and we launched it quietly without press attention. It felt like turning pain into something that could actually help people, like making Linda's story mean something beyond just revenge against Richard. The anniversary celebration brought over 300 people to the store on a Saturday afternoon. Local officials gave speeches about standing up to corruption and supporting local businesses against monopolistic practices. The mayor, who'd been elected after 2 city council members were arrested in Richard's case, talked about rebuilding trust in local government. I stood near the beer tasting table watching people fill the parking lot and the store, families and tourists and locals who'd become regular customers over the past year. Someone from the local paper interviewed me, and I talked about the importance of fair competition and community support. I realized my business had become a symbol of resistance against the kind of power Richard represented, and that felt bigger and more important than just running a profitable store. That evening, after everyone left, I stood in my store looking at the shelves I'd stocked and the business I'd built and nearly lost. Empty plastic cups littered the floor, and the parking lot needed cleaning, but I felt satisfied in a way I hadn't expected. The victory cost me my relationship with my girlfriend, cost me my innocence about family loyalty and Uncle Jim's motives, cost me months of stress and fear that I'd never completely forget. But I was still here, and Richard wasn't, serving 12 years in federal prison while I ran a successful business in my hometown. That wasn't perfect justice, because perfect justice would mean Aunt Linda never died and Richard never had the power to destroy people in the first place. But it was real justice, the kind that actually exists in the world instead of the kind you wish for, and sometimes that has to be enough. All right, that's it for today. Honestly, I just love that you're here listening to these with me. It never gets old. Hope this one left you smiling a bit.